Hi friends, it's Grace and welcome back to another video. For today's video, I had an idea that's a little bit of a departure from things I've done in the past because I've never done a video with this concept before, but I did think that it was really cool. And so that is basically recommending you books based on the album Folklore by Taylor Swift, which essentially just means that I was gonna say I listened to the album to do this. Folklore is one of my favorite albums, so I have listened to it like 1,000 times for you in order to do this. But I just thought it would be a cool idea if I recommended books based on every song on the album, and this is obviously a very personal thing in the sense that I'm not trying to match like perfectly, but I listened to each song and considered books that I thought gave similar vibes to the song. And I will, of course, explain my reasoning for picking the books that I did for each song, but I just thought this was a really fun idea and a really different and interesting way to give recommendations. Of course, you deciding whether you feel like my picks match works better if you yourself have also listened to and thought about the album, because otherwise you might just not know whether what I picked has any bearing or any relation to the song in question. But I hope that enough of you are interested in something like this, that you enjoy this, and even if not, I had fun making it. I might do this with more of her albums. We'll see. But like I said, Folklore is one of my favorite albums of all time, not just by Taylor Swift. So I was kind of inspired by watching the Folklore Diaries that are on Disney Plus, because in those you see Taylor Swift, Jack Antonoff, and Aaron Dessner like actually talk about each song, and not that in depth about like the making of it, but enough about the inspirations, like the emotional inspirations and what each song is actually kind of about, that it was inspiration for me to kind of think more about what each song connects to and books that I've read that could match up to that. So anyway, without further ado and more of my introductory rambling, we will get right into it. Now, I will say that while I'm going to do the video in order as the tracks appear on the album, some of these songs were easier for me to come up with than others, and some songs I personally feel have more perfect matches than others. So if you don't feel like we're starting strong, maybe stick around to see if your favorite song has a book recommendation that you would like to read. But with that said, the first song on Folklore is The One. Now, to me, The One was a little bit of a tougher song to match up because of the fact that I feel like for the most part, this is a pretty happy song. Everything on Folklore has its emotional undertones, but for the most part, The One is sort of like thinking about someone you've been with in your past and talking to them about how you're doing really well now, and life is actually going really well, and things have changed since you were with them or since that stage in your life. And I really love this song, and I think that the reason why it was so difficult is because a lot of the books that I read are sad. So the books that I chose, I have two for this. The first one is Fool's Errand by Robin Hobb, and this is the first book in the Tawny Man trilogy, which is the third trilogy in this series, The Realm of the Elderlings. So this one is a little bit hard to talk about without spoilers, but my reason for matching Fool's Errand up with The One is primarily because in this story, we start with a character who has had to enter a new era in his life, has had to make kind of forced emotional change based on the ending of a previous series, and is actually doing well. Like, don't get me wrong, has had emotional trauma in his past that he has had to overcome to be here, but reading the beginning of Fool's Errand felt like coming home to me. And it had this amazingly intense feeling of like serenity and calmness that, because of the nature of Realm of the Elderlings, you knew wouldn't last. But it's that same feeling to me that The One gives me when like Taylor Swift is writing about like, you know, I'm doing good now, I've been saying yes instead of no. And a lot of the lyrics resonate, I think, with the feeling that the beginning of this trilogy gives. And it is very niche, but there is also the aspect of this character wanting to convince the people that were in his life in the past that he is in fact fine now. He can survive this way, kind of alone, kind of without them. So that's my reasoning for Fool's Errand by Robin Hobb. Now, my second one, and I debated including this or not because I don't think it's as strong as the other one, but that is Circe by Madeline Miller. And the reason that I picked this one is in essence very similar, but it's the fact that Circe is like a notorious character for being misunderstood as a villain in certain stories. But when you go back into the origin story of Circe, and in this book, you get to explore how Circe is able to leave behind people that didn't necessarily treat her right and strikes out on her own, lives by herself. And basically, it kind of connects with those lyrics of like, if you never bleed, you're never gonna grow. And saying how you never know, it's another day waking up alone. And that aspect of the song, along with this, I'm doing better now that I'm not with you, or that I'm not in that stage of my life anymore. So this one is maybe a little bit more fitting for different aspects of the song. None of these are completely perfect because neither one of them are really romances, but I do believe that they fit the spirit. Track 2 on Folklore is Cardigan, and this is an interesting one because it is part of the trifecta of connected songs on Folklore, but this song has the aspect of being about a relationship that happened when you were younger, reflecting back on it, reflecting about what it was like to be that age and the feelings that you had and what everybody thought of it at the time. And just being able to look back on that with more life experience and sing about it. And I really love the song Cardigan. And so I was kind of proud of this pick that I have for this one. And that is Spells for Forgetting by Adrienne Young. And the kind of specific reason that I have for selecting this one is because in Spells for Forgetting, we have I want to say a boy and a girl, but back when the original incident happened, they were a boy and a girl. They were like 17, and now I think that our characters are like 30. It's been maybe like 13 years, 14 years, something like that. And so we have Emery, who still and always has lived on this small island of her birth, and Emery and August were in love when they were teenagers, but August was accused of being the culprit of a murder that occurred of Emery's best friend. And that was when they were teenagers, and August was essentially exiled off the island. I'm not using these words on purpose, although the fact that his name is August and the fact that he was exiled, guys, come on, it's all fitting together. But essentially, he has been gone for years, and he is brought back as an adult to deal with sort of the closure after his mother passes away. His mother still lived on the island, and so he needs to help with her final affairs, deal with her house, things like that. And this brings up a whole bunch of stuff from before. And the unique thing about like the song Cardigan and the fact that it's part of the like 3 songs that are connected is that it's sort of about a love triangle between 2 girls and a boy when they're teenagers. And as you read this book, you discover that everything wasn't so simple back when these characters were teenagers either. There was a little bit of jealousy, a little bit of like uncertainty, not necessarily cheating, but feelings that went in multiple directions. And now that they are back together again as adults, there's a lot of reflecting back on the past and a lot of looking at where you are now and deciding what people you are and whether you want to be together, whether this is something that can happen or not, and having everybody else tell you what they think of that. And that kind of speaks to the line in Cardigan where it's like, when you're young, they assume you know nothing, but then like everybody's going to tell you what they think, sorry. And to me, this book just has that like fall vibe and the sort of like spooky witchy vibe that I get from Folklore a little bit, and Evermore has it too a little bit, but this to me just gives total Folklore vibes in general, this book, and I think this is the song that it fits best for. Track 3 is The Last Great American Dynasty, and this is a tricky one where I feel like my pick fits very well for this, but also it doesn't completely fit the tone, because The Last Great American Dynasty does tell a little bit of a sad story, but the entire song also has a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek tone, a little bit of fun to it, whereas the book that I've chosen very much has a more melancholy tone to it. However, my pick is The God of the Woods by Liz Moore, and the reason for this is because a large portion of the significance of what happens in this book has to do with this prominent family that has an estate on this land that they own, and tragedy strikes the family, and just like it does in the song The Last Great American Dynasty, when the husband passes away. And this is sort of a sadder version of a similar thing where the community has to adjust, and you very much have those vibes of American old money and the parties and everything that Taylor Swift describes in the song The Last Great American Dynasty. Those are the type of vibes that you get from the people, the family that everything centers around in The God of the Woods. And so that is my reasoning for selecting this. But like I said, I think that The God of the Woods is a lot sadder, especially because The Last Great American Dynasty has that arresting line at the end of, and then it was bought by me, I own Holiday House now. And especially you have her dyeing the dog key lime green and things like that, which this book definitely doesn't have, but I still think that at its core, the type of people that you're talking about, they're the same people. These people in another life, they could have owned Holiday House and been the heir to the Standard Oil name and money, you know what I mean? So that's my pick for this song. Track 4 on Folklore is Exile featuring Bon Iver, and this was a tough one for me as well. I think just because this song describes such an emotionally fraught relationship, but it's also so deep emotionally in the sense that these people still care about each other, but this is not a happy time. This is someone leaving. This is the relationship falling apart. And so the book that I chose for Exile is Migrations by Charlotte McConaughey. And so the hallmarks for me with this book, tying it to this song, are the fact that our main character, Franny, she is kind of enduring a literal exile, even if it's self-imposed, where she is taking on this research where she has struck out by herself, and she tries to find a boat and a crew that will take her to follow the last Arctic terns all the way on their migration down to Antarctica, which could be a very dangerous and fruitless journey, because we live in sort of a near future in this book where if we continue along our current path, a lot of wildlife is going to be depleted. A lot of these birds, they've simply died out. And so she is making it her life's mission to track these birds, but her self-imposed exile has come from the falling apart of a relationship. And she has always been a bit of an emotionally fraught spirit in general, but Franny had a marriage that we as the reader don't necessarily know why, but it fell apart, and now she has left, and we don't know what happened, but we know that she is here chasing birds and not there. And all throughout the book, you get a very impending sense that we are eventually going to find out about her negative past and the darkness in it and what happened. And there is a darkness within this book that I feel like corresponds to the darkness within the emotions of the song. And for me, it just matches really well. I think it depends on what you get from the song and what you get from this book when you read it. But for me, it matches really well. And they are both, I think, at their core, very sad pieces of art. Okay, the next song on the album, track 5, is My Tears Ricochet. and this is one of my favorite songs on the album, one of my favorite Taylor Swift songs in general, and also a really tough one to match a book to until I thought of what is maybe my proudest comparison on this list, and that is Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. So My Tears Ricochet is so, like, it's a metaphor, but in this sense, like comparing it to this book, it also becomes very literal, because obviously normally and when Taylor is singing about it, like the line, "If I'm dead to you, why are you at the wake?" and like, "You killed me, but it killed you just the same." Like, those are obviously metaphors, but in Wuthering Heights, we encounter a couple who are both terrible people and who are both tragic characters, and everyone around them is too, for having to endure them. But they do have a very toxic, very unhealthy love that is so enduring that you can literally say that, like, beyond the grave, I still talk to you. Like, we have one surviving character and one non-surviving character, and they basically, like, their relationship still persists through death and affects and impacts everything that Heathcliff does and everyone around them and everybody who lives in the vicinity. And even when My Tears Ricochet talks about the relationship that was before this schism happened, it is still very chaotic and like up and down, and mentioning, like, you know, you gather stones not knowing whether they're going to be for a diamond ring or to throw at someone. And that sounds like a very toxic relationship to me, which fits what's in here. And I personally just feel like this gothic vibe permeates My Tears Ricochet perfectly. Like, that's what I get when I listen to the song. So tell me what you think, because I was so happy when I thought of this. I feel like it fits the song perfectly. Track 6 on Folklore is Mirrorball, and while I will admit that this is not my favorite album on the song to listen to, I do think that when you get into what this song is saying and what it's about, it's a super interesting song.
It started raining, it started gusting just as I had the big pile, and I was there like,
oh.
But I got more.
Okay.
See it?
Bye. So my pick for the song Mirrorball is The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid, and this is one that, even though I think the comparison here is really interesting, I have less to say about it just on a surface level, because I think that the comparison is a little bit more evident, in the sense that for me, this book fits perfectly because the song Mirrorball talks about essentially like changing the face that you show the world and having all of these different aspects of yourself that can be highlighted in different relationships, and being able to reflect other people and like being whoever best fits the scenario at the time. And I feel like what we learn about Evelyn Hugo in this book shows that she was essentially a master of that. Like, she will show you whichever face it is that you bring out of her and which fits her kind of ambitions and the scenario and everything the most. But also there's an underlying acknowledgement that these are not all your true self, and not everybody is going to see your true self, and that is a core theme of the book as well, possibly the core theme of the book. So I think that the song and the book match up really well on that core like through line. Next up is the track 7 on the album, which is 7, and this is a comparison book, which I feel like the tones of the song and the book, they don't match, but the content and the kind of like vibe and feeling that they give, for me, it matches perfectly. So I'd be interested for anybody who likes this album who has also read the book to chime in and let me know what you think, because the book that I chose for 7 is The Ocean at the End of the Lane by Neil Gaiman. And this is a book that I have said in the past that I find to be a comforting and maybe cozy is not the right word, but a comforting read. And I know that based on some of the content in here, like, people do not agree with that, and like, don't get me wrong, I get it. I don't really know what it is about this book that makes me like sink into it so much, but the main kind of ideas that I'm working with here between Seven and The Ocean at the End of the Lane is that Seven is written from the perspective of a child, like a young person who is sort of like, she mentions being uncivilized, and before you learn to kind of be ladylike, like you scream whenever you want. And the storyline of the song mentions like a friend and pretending to be pirates and hiding in the closet. And the line that really struck me is, "I think your house is haunted. Your dad is always mad, and that must be why." And that is kind of the line in the song that anchors it to this book for me, because we have like a middle-aged man in this book who is coming back to his childhood home, and only when he comes back and sits on the bench out back of his childhood home, he remembers this time from when he was a child, when he met like a family of women from down the end of the lane and experienced like magic. And he remembers this time from his life where this was essentially a safe space for him, where they would help him. And when he was home, his father was being manipulated by dark facets of this magic to like abuse him. And the perspective of this book from like a child, it makes it very scary. It makes you as the reader feel powerless, and it makes that atmosphere like so intense. And that for me is the connection where, to me, the song Seven is talking about a relationship between two children where they find an escape in each other. They find an escape in playing pretend. Like, one of these children clearly has an abusive parent, and they use these like imaginatory games to escape from that and to spend time together. And that to me is essentially what this book does and what it is. And so even though I feel like Seven has a slightly more like, it is still sad when you think about the content, but Seven has a slightly more neutral to hopeful tone, whereas I feel like Ocean at the End of the Lane has a little bit more of a melancholy, sad tone. I still feel like when you look at those themes that are present in both of them, that's why I matched this up to the song. Track 8 on Folklore is, of course, the song August. And while I love this song, and it is also part of the trifecta of connected love triangle songs, I'll admit that I didn't feel like I had the perfect book pick for this song. I feel like this song is a very specific feeling about a whirlwind summer romance, but it's also sad because you know that at the end these two are parting ways. And it's also sad in another way because you know that there is another girl whose boyfriend essentially left her for the summer to be part of this romance. So this book doesn't fit that, but I did choose Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez because in this book we have two people who essentially they come together. The way they come together is through the internet and through like a Reddit post that gets seen, and they both think that they are cursed, where every person that they date and then break up with, that person then finds their soulmate the next time they date someone. So their names are Justin and Emma, and Justin and Emma figure that if they date each other, then they will break the curse. And I loved this book, and it is sad and emotional in different ways. It has to do more with each individual character's struggles, like in their own lives with family and stuff. But for me, the reason that this connected with August was because Emma is a traveling nurse, and so she and her friend will take on travel nursing assignments where they're in one place for 6 weeks. I think it's 6 weeks. Or maybe it's I forget, 6 weeks seems really short now. Maybe it's like 2 or 3 months, but essentially they take on a position where they are only contracted to stay there for that amount of time, and that's it. So when Justin and Emma want to go through with this plan, there very much is a time limit on it, and they know that this romance needs to end after that time period unless they do something else about it. And so that is kind of where I best fit this in. And it does work to a certain extent, but I just feel like it doesn't really capture the full essence of the song. So this is one where I would love to hear suggestions if you feel like you have a book that is the perfect match for the song August, because I love this song and I feel like it deserves for me to find it a book that fits better. Track 9 is This Is Me Trying, and this is another song kind of like Mirrorball, where I don't always listen to this song unless I'm listening to the full album, but I think that the reason for that is because I have to be in the right mood to kind of absorb what the song is saying, because this is a sad song. And I know that a lot of them are on this album, to be honest, but this one is, I feel like, just a song that kind of demands my full attention. So this is an interesting one to try and match up, because to me, This Is Me Trying is kind of about like someone who had very high expectations of them, who feels like they're falling behind and failing those expectations, and then kind of decides to just distance themselves from the problem as a whole because they think that that's better than failing and like trying really hard but failing, and they're still trying but they just can't do it anymore. And so the book that I chose for this is actually The Deep by River Solomon, and so this might be a bit of a surprising pick, but the reason that I feel like this matches so well is because The Deep is about an underwater like community and essentially an evolution of creatures that happened in the Atlantic Ocean from slaves who were either like thrown off or fell off of slave ships and ended up in the Atlantic Ocean and survived underwater. I forget what these creatures are called, to be honest, but they are mermaid-esque, but they are essentially formed from like a very sad and mistreated past, but they have built a community that has an identity, and in this community there is one called the Historian that holds most of the more emotionally difficult memories, and there is one historian at a time, not necessarily one every generation, but one historian that can live for a very long time and holds all the memories, and once a year the whole clan gets together to experience the memories again. But then that kind of like session will end and the historian will hold all of the memories inside of themselves again, and most of these people do not have to live with the traumatic memories day to day. But as you can imagine, this is very traumatic for the historian. So we have a main character in this novella who is being primed to become the historian, and is kind of has this role thrust upon them before they feel like they're ready for it, or before they feel like they've had enough time to learn it or prepare for it. And everything is overwhelming. They were expected to be able to do this with no troubles, but they feel like they're failing. They feel like they are drowning. They cannot do it. Not only is it a big responsibility, but it also involves being the person responsible for experiencing all of these traumatic memories all of the time that no one else around you has access to. So you're essentially dealing with it all by yourself. And to me, this is the perfect like vibe match for This Is Me Trying, because it kind of literally corresponds to a lot of the lyrics in the song that talk about like, I just want you to know that I'm trying my best and that I really feel like I've fallen behind and that I'm failing, and I'm leaving, but I don't even know if you would care if I came back, and I regret how I've handled it, and all of that to me is screaming this book. So as you can imagine, this does have some notes of hope threaded through it, but it is quite a sad novella, but it is also very good, and it is something that I've continued to think about for a long time. Track 10 on Folklore is Illicit Affairs, and this of course is a song about how an affair can deceive you and how the kind of thrilling elements of it, they only last so long and eventually it withers away into this thing that sort of like wears you down if it continues happening. Like it stops making you feel good in any way and really it starts doing the opposite and starts making you feel really, really bad. And this was one that I found difficult as well because I realized when I thought about this that I've read very few books that I can explicitly remember including cheating on a partner. But what I came up with was The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald, because I feel like there is something to be said here about there being themes of, like, there's adultery for sure, but I feel like there's definitely a theme here of like all of these people kind of trying to find something in themselves again by making these decisions that they shouldn't and like having relationships with people that they shouldn't or cheating on their partners or whatever it may be, like because they think it will make them feel differently, they think that it will save them from like whatever it is that they feel in the monotony of their lives, and then they find that it really doesn't, which goes along with kind of the main theme of The Great Gatsby, where like all the parties that Gatsby throws are a front for a person who's actually very emotionally damaged. So I do think that there is a strong connection to be drawn between Illicit Affairs and The Great Gatsby, but I didn't feel like I had a perfect book to compare to this song. Track 11 is Invisible String, and this is another song that I found difficult to match, and another song that I really love and is one of my favorites, and I feel like there's a bit of a correlation here between the songs that I love the most and the ones that I find difficult. And maybe it's because there are so many facets, like I know these songs so well, that there are so many things that I'm thinking about when I listen to them, and I feel like a book matches one piece of it. It might only be that one piece, so even if I think about it, I'm like, okay, well this doesn't really match like the whole vibe, or the analogy kind of falls apart when you think about another part of the song. But I do have two for Invisible String for similar reasons, but slightly different because just because the books in themselves have different concepts, obviously. But I do feel like these make a pretty decent match for the song. So the first one is Persuasion by Jane Austen, and the main thing for me that connects this song to this book is the fact that Persuasion is a second chance romance. So we have our main character, Anne, who when she's younger is persuaded that she can do better than the man she loves. And she gives into that pressure, but she never does end up finding someone better. And then this is a second chance romance, so they do meet again later in life, and to me it's like there is an invisible string between the two of them, and that life was taking them down different paths for a while but bringing them back together. And there's a lot about time in Invisible String, like cutting me open and healing me fine, or it gave me no compasses, gave me no signs, where people have to have faith and that time will bring them back together, or time will bring them what they need. And so I feel like that matches Persuasion. And then a lot of the same things can be said about Panenka by Ronan Hessian. And so this book is about a middle-aged man who is kind of an outcast, a social outcast in his community, because back when he was younger, he did something sort of foolish. He attempted a panenka in like a soccer match and he played for the local team, and it failed and it lost them a very important game, and everyone remembers that about him. But it has been a very long time. He is having a hard time, he's struggling, and he meets a woman, and we kind of get to see them flourish. And this is a very quiet, emotional book, and I think that there's less, it's not like Persuasion where they meet earlier in life and they have faith that life might bring them back together, but this is more like fate is bringing you to somewhere. Like at some point you're gonna meet someone that every decision that you made led you to here, and time can heal the wounds from earlier in your life. And you didn't know that at the time, but by the time you meet this person, they're going to help you be okay, and sort of themes along that line. So I think that both of those books kind of emotionally capture Invisible String. Next up, track 12 is Mad Woman, and this was a fun one because this is also one of my favorite songs that I love, but this one is a little bit easier to get a read on. This one has a clear theme. This is, you know, it's about a woman who is not allowed to express her emotions because you call her crazy, but that makes her crazy, because that would make anyone crazy to be constantly invalidated. And it's sort of like the retaliation that occurs after that happens to you again and again. And I love the song Mad Woman. I think that she wrote it so well, and it's just perfectly put together, like on Folklore. And so I do have two books for this one as well, because I think that they both kind of capture it in different ways. The first one is The Winter of the Witch by Catherine Arden, and this is the conclusion to the fantasy trilogy, the Winter Night trilogy. And this deals with our main character, Vazia, who grows up isolated in like a family that like owns lands kind of farther out in the Russian wilderness. These are historical fantasies, so this takes place in, like, I want to say the 1200s. And it kind of chronicles the rise of Christianity versus old paganism. And we have a main character who is essentially told at every turn that she is not growing into what a woman should be. She is strange, she's weird, she does not do or act the way that they think someone of her station or someone in her position should. She has connections to the household spirits, and by the time we hit the third book, we are definitely seeing, to me, it's the culmination of the themes that are discussed in the song, which I love, and which, like, I love this character, I love this series, so it's sort of like a good for her moment. I think that this perfectly captures it. And then we kind of have a similar witchy theme in Wayward, and maybe it's just that I think that the lyrics and the vibes in Mad Woman, they give me like a retaliatory vibe where a woman that has access to magic is able to have her revenge. But both of these books capture it perfectly for me, because Wayward deals with women in three different timelines: the early 1600s, the 1940s during World War II, and then present day in 2019. And all three of these women deal with different people in their lives trying to smother them, trying to beat them down into submission, trying to tell them that their emotions and their desires and their like attempts to live a life are not valid. And you have, like, to me, a perfect embodiment of the line, like, what a shame she went mad. How could we have predicted that this would happen? Where these women take their lives back into their own hands. So for me, both of these kind of embody what I picture the song to be about. And this is a song in particular where I feel like you could have so many books to match this. So I would also love to hear like your ideas for this as well. Not that I wouldn't for any of the other songs, but I would just be curious to see what screams Mad Woman to you. Track 13 is Epiphany, and this is definitely one of the songs in the kind of folklore studio sessions that got me thinking about doing this video, because hearing them talk about Epiphany, it first occurred to me that the entire song doesn't have to be a metaphor. The song could also be literally about war and experiences at war. And I had never even considered that before, to take some of the lyrics literally, but like Taylor Swift does talk about, I think it was her grandfather, like talking to him about some of his experiences and kind of writing those into a song. And it was at that moment that I was like, oh, you know what I think would fit perfectly for this? And it's Guns of the Dawn by Adrian Tchaikovsky, because I feel like this book in particular has so much heart to it, and it also has like really close emotional relationships between characters that are going to war together day in and day out in like a level of technology that is very, it makes warfare very slow going, in the sense that like they feel like they're bleeding out. Like it might be that literally one of their companions is dying, but it could also just be that like they feel like they've been dealt a blow in the army and that they're slowly bleeding out, slowly losing the war, but also on an emotional level. And it talks about like not being able to speak about it, which I think applies to so many of the characters in this book. If they and when they get home, like to their families or back to their normal lives, it doesn't feel real. Like it doesn't even feel like they are now living the same life that they were, and they can't talk to people about it. They can only maybe talk to the people that have the same experiences as them. And it also just talks about like dreaming of an epiphany that just gives you momentary relief. And the end of the song is this repeated refrain of like serving with someone falling down and watching them breathe in and out. And like it works on two levels, where it works on an emotional level when you talk about the relationships in this book, but it also works very literally on a warfare level, because I feel like the way that battles and warfare are written in this book, Adrian Tchaikovsky is so good at it, and it matches what I feel when I listen to Epiphany. And it's sort of ironic that it was like an epiphany that the song could actually be about literal war, but once I realized that, hearing her talk about it, this was the first book that I thought of. Okay, track 14 is Betty. And this is a very interesting one because this song has, I think, it has leveled itself out with the rest of the album for me, where other songs have risen, where I have found how much more I love them. But when the album first came out, Betty was like my favorite song on the album. I played it so much, and it is the hardest song, without a doubt, on the entire album for me to pick a book for. And I think maybe it's because I don't read enough romance, and in my brain, like this teenage high school love triangle, it had to be a romance book, but I just don't have a pick for it. And it still was the hardest one. It was the last song that I filled in, and I'm still not entirely happy with this. But what I settled on was In My Dreams, I Hold a Knife by Ashley Winstead. And this probably feels super out of left field because this is a thriller. This deals with the murder of a group's best friend like 10 years in the past. But the reason that I picked this has to do with the past timeline of this book, because we have a group of 6 characters who are so chaotic and so toxic, and while they are in like college, university, they like their friend group stays intact, but they do so many things to each other, and they just have like the most drama. It's almost like a Gossip Girl type like situation we've got going on here. But their friend group breaks up when one of them is murdered, and the murder is never solved. And in the present timeline of this book, I believe it's 10 years later, the younger brother of the girl who was murdered essentially corners them all at like a college reunion and is like, I'm gonna get to the bottom of this. I have discovered so many secrets about all of you, and I'm gonna tell you that like I know who did it. And to me, this is sort of like showing up at the party and wondering if you're going to be accepted, and finding out whether like the person that you're friends with knows what you did. And that's kind of the best comparison that I can come up with, because like the song talks about rumors and like what everybody at school knows, and like not caring what they think, but then showing up at the party at the end of the summer and wondering if she's going to take you back. And this kind of gives those vibes to me, because it's very immature, the past timeline, like the way that they treat one another. And it's just the best that I could come up with. I think you can probably tell the way I'm talking about this that I'm not as happy with it as some of the other comparisons. So I would be very interested to see what any of you would say would match well with Betty, because I think there's just so much to the storytelling of that song that it makes it very difficult to match a book up. Okay, track 15 is Peace, and this is also one of my favorite songs, and I think that this pick might seem a little bit off the wall too, but I think that this one fits much better if you really look at the lyrics and kind of compare it to what we have going on in the book, and that is This Is How You Lose the Time War by Amal El-Motar and Max Gladstone. So first of all, even though this is a very conceptual, very abstract sci-fi novella, this is a romance. It is beautifully written, and it is essentially running on vibes and running on like emotion and imagery. So the main kind of core connection here is this idea of, would this relationship be enough for you if I could never give you peace? And in this book, we have two time agents on opposite sides of a war, and I think that it's pretty evident that they can never give one another peace. They can like flow throughout time, encountering one another at different points, but they will never have a peaceful relationship together because their very essences, like the organizations that they're a part of that consume the entire universe, are on opposite sides. Nobody is going to let them just peacefully settle down together. It's not an option. And then the other reason that I connect this book to this song is this imagery that you have. Like, you have in the song this imagery of like, I'm a fire, I'll keep your brittle heart warm, very much red imagery, and your cascade ocean wave blues come, you have blue, and it's also like, people think love's for show, but I would die for you in secret, which is sort of the essence of the fact that this relationship has to be secret at all costs. They sneak around leaving messages for one another because absolutely no one can know. And the reason that no one could know is that they would never have peace if people knew. And like, the devil's in the details, and like, you paint dreamscapes on the wall. Like, all of this screams imagery to me. I love the imagery in the song, and I think that it matches up with the nature of this book, where it is very like writing and imagery focused, because this book brings like images to life that you almost just have no idea what's going on because they're so creative and so abstract. Like, this world is so divorced from our own, but I personally think these match really well, and I love this novella, so this is like a 10 out of 10 recommend. Okay, we are almost finished. Track 16 is Hoax, and there's only one more after this. But Hoax is such a sad and bittersweet song. Like, there is so much pain in this song. And this is kind of another song where the book is hard to talk about because, like, I would need to talk about spoilers, and I don't want to do that. But what I'm thinking of is The Long Price Quartet by Daniel Abraham, because Hoax talks about when you're part of a relationship that is causing you a lot of sadness, causing you a lot of pain. There's betrayal there, but like, you still love them, like you still had a relationship, like no other sadness in the world would do, that type of thing, where like you still are part of this relationship, but it's causing you a lot of pain. And so I have a particular relationship in here that I'm thinking of, and it is not a romantic relationship, but it is the, when you think about the way this series plays out, it is the most significant and most impactful relationship in the entire series, in my opinion. And these two characters, the way that they revolve around each other, they go through different stages of their lives where they are friends and confidants and like two of the most important people in each other's lives. And then there's a disagreement, there's a difference in core values and the way that they would handle things, and there's betrayal, and there is the aftermath where it's really hard to pick up the pieces, and there's so much bitterness in this relationship. And yeah, like this, the interesting thing is that the relationship that I have in mind here, when you listen to the song, it has both perspectives. Like, in the song, it's obviously from one person's perspective, but the relationship in the books, it's almost like they're talking to each other in the lyrics of the song. Like some of it applies to one party and the other applies to the other party. And so it's really interesting, and I wish that I could be more specific, but I think that if you are one of the like 15 people in the world that loves Long Price Quartet and also loves folklore, then you'll know what I'm talking about, and I think it's perfect. Now, the final track on the album, the bonus track 17, is The Lakes. And this is an interesting comparison here because the book that I want to compare to The Lakes is actually a book that was in my unhaul video, so I don't have it with me. And even though it was not my favorite book in the world, I still feel like it has a really solid comparison to the song. And so the book that I'm talking about is Alone with You in the Ether by Olivia Blake. And the reason that I want to compare this to The Lakes is because in The Lakes, Taylor Swift is talking about physically removing yourself, like escaping to the lakes, escaping to a cabin, not wanting to have anything to do with society at the moment, that type of thing. But it's a little bit more metaphorical in Alone with You in the Ether, where it seems like these two main characters, they form sort of a codependent, toxic relationship, but they together, they want to remove themselves from society and like just get kind of wrapped up and insulated in each other. And that's all, like they spend a large portion of the book just kind of wrapped up in each other like that, and that's how they want to escape. And so that is like, that's kind of my main reason for the connection. And the other thing is that there's a lot of allusions in The Lakes to like art and poetry and the fact that this is where all the poets went to die. And that's the other reason that I think it's a good comparison to Alone with You in the Ether, is because although one of our characters is very mathematics focused, our other character is much more of an artist, and it definitely has that feeling of like, it's a very poetic isolation. Like we want to isolate ourselves, but we think that it's very artsy of us, like it's very poetic, our love, our relationship, that type of thing. It's a little bit more like satirical in Alone with You in the Ether, whereas I think it comes across a little bit more earnest in The Lakes, but it still has that same kind of quality to it to me. So that is my final comparison. This video is actually going to be so long, it's insane. If I do this for the other albums, I might honestly just pick and choose songs that I think I have the best book recommendations for, because a few of these I struggled to fill. Honestly, most of folklore I had ideas for because the folklore songs are just so rich in like the imagery and the emotions that she's talking about and like the types of relationships and things like that, that I had a lot of fun matching up the book recommendations to the songs. But I don't even know how, like, if you stayed until the end of this video, I just appreciate you. And you must really love Taylor Swift and want to know about books that bring the same vibes as the songs. Like, don't get me wrong, I still had fun doing this, but I'm realizing now that it might be kind of ridiculous, and we'll see how I format it in future album videos. But like I said, I still had a good time, so I hope that you had fun watching this. I hope that it worked out for you. Like I mentioned, I would be really interested to hear your thoughts on what books you think match up with these songs, what books you would recommend based on the same vibes, and how you think I did. Obviously, I didn't feel like I was perfect with all of them, but I tried to explain how I matched those up and why I would recommend them. And yeah, so that is going to be it for this Folklore Songs as Book Recommendations video. Please like this video if you liked it, subscribe if you'd like to see more from me. As always, I will have my Discord with Ben and my socials linked in the description if you're interested in any of that stuff, and I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day. Bye!